Good morning, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Hawk Blogger Mornings. I am Brian Nemhauser. You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, all sorts of places at Hawk Blogger. In fact, I was on with ESPN Las Vegas just yesterday afternoon, and the host for that station said he found me from TikTok. So congrats to Will Hart and all the guys that have been helping me get some of the content out on all these platforms. It's working. Some people are finding me, and not only are they finding some of this stuff, but they actually want to talk. So that's good stuff. It is a Tuesday morning, and this is episode 358. That means we are exactly 1 week away from episode 365. I am woefully unprepared. I have good ideas. Doesn't mean I'm going to do them, but we'll celebrate 365 straight days of this show next Tuesday. Looking forward to that. At some point this week, I expect there'll be a Cooper Kupp press conference. No final word yet that I've seen from the Seahawks about when that will be. I'll obviously get to the VMAC. We'll do that. Hopefully, I'll get a chance to talk to Mr. Kupp, but he'll be a popular interview, so that'll be a hard pull, but we'll see what we can do. And, latest news from the Seahawks yesterday, as I had reported last week, that Lucas Patrick was going to make a visit, the former Saints guard and partially sometimes center, was going to make a visit. He made that visit yesterday. That was confirmed by Aaron Wilson and on the NFL transaction log. By the way, I think Aaron Wilson just confirms it from the NFL transaction log. And so he's been here. Tevin Jenkins was not an official visit. The guard from the Bears was not an official visit yesterday, but Bob Condotta reported that could have just meant that he arrived after the 1 p.m. time period where those visits are meant to be captured and reported. So if that's true, then we should see Tevin Jenkins officially listed as a visitor today. Michael Gallup, the former wide receiver for the Dallas Cowboys, reported to be visiting the Seahawks, and he retired last year after he went to the Raiders, trying to make a comeback. Could be just that they're kicking the tires. John Schneider brings in guys all the time to just understand where they're at, whether they're an option for the future. Could be a guy that they're looking to sign now, but it feels like the receiver room is pretty well stocked with Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Cooper Kupp in tow, as well as Jackson Smith-Njigba and Jake Bobo and Cody White. I think they're okay there for now, especially going into the draft, but you never know. And Michael Gallup's had some pretty impressive years, a guy that I've actually kind of liked at the receiver position, but not sure that they really need to add another receiver to this offense as of now. So what's going to happen today's show? First things first, there's been a lot of talk about what the Seahawks are doing this offseason in Seattle, but also outside of Seattle. And I'm sure you guys have heard some of it. So I wanted to pull some of those clips together to play for you on this show. And honestly, I could have just spent the whole show doing that. But also today, that happened this morning, Mel Kiper Jr. and Daniel Jeremiah released their latest mock drafts. I have not looked at them. I don't know what's on them. If you're saying in chat what they're doing, I'm not going to read it. I'm going to try to ignore chat because I'm going to get and live react to those drafts on the show. So we'll do that a little bit later. And who knows? Maybe we'll have time for a mock draft ourselves. I'm guessing not, but we will see. Otherwise, and then I'll take your super chats. We'll answer questions, things like that. So all good stuff, all coming soon. And before we get into that, I'd really appreciate a like and a subscribe. Really, really appreciate it. The community is just booming. It was like about 2 weeks ago that we celebrated 15,000 subscribers. And then a few days ago, we celebrated 16,000 subscribers. We are almost to 17,000 subscribers. So really appreciate everyone joining and being part of this like awesome community. And a lot of those folks are gathering on the Discord server that I started. I really launched it yesterday. We've got well over 100 people in there from patreon.com/hawkblogger, as well as YouTube members. You have to be a club level or suite level YouTube member. So if you're just got gifted a membership and you're Hawks Nest level, you'll be able to go over there and see one channel, which is just to let people know that you need to be upgraded to actually get access to the full experience. So lots of great conversation. People are having a lot of fun over there. I highly recommend it. Mariners talk, Kraken talk, Seahawks talk, draft talk, all sorts of things. So make sure you're a club level member or go to patreon.com/hawkblogger. All right. So let's get into these live reactions right away. And the first one that I wanted to play for you was from our good friends over at The Athletic. I think Robert Mays, as I've told you, best in the biz from my perspective, and what they do on The Athletic Football Show is amazing. So I'm going to have a few different clips from that Athletic Football Show, and I'm going to actually play these a little bit out of order. So understand that they did, it's kind of similar to me. They did a 5-hour, free agency bonanza where they did a full day, and then they did a 1-hour recap. That was the day that the moves were made, when Sam Darnold was signed, things like that. I'm going to play some clips from that, but before that, I'm going to actually play what they recorded after, a few days after, more recently, which is, a conversation about, are the Seahawks, are these teams that made moves better? And the first answer, you're going to hear Derek Klassen, who's amazing and is the kind of the co-host with Robert Mays. Here's what he said, and you'll hear Robert asking the question.
Do you think the Seattle Seahawks are better off right now than they were at the start of free agency?
No, absolutely not. Even, listen, I know that this is supposed to be for the next 3 years, and I understand that they can actually get out of the Sam Darnold contract after year one. So, in theory, their flexibility over the next 3 years is actually kind of good. And then obviously opening up the DK thing kind of allows them to not have as much money tied into one player who was probably too much money for that kind of player, in my opinion. However, I still think that Geno over the next 3 years would have been more valuable than all of the other stuff that they've put together here. And I know that obviously them in the building, they disagreed with that, so they wanted to pivot off of that. But it's very hard for me to move off of that point.
So that's Derek Klassen, and I love that he's clear-minded about this, and I love that you can hear the tinge of emotion in there too. Derek, has been defending Geno Smith and his value for years, and he's not unrealistic about how good he is, but he's a top 12 quarterback is kind of where Derek, I think, generally gets with Geno Smith. And I think he raises a really important question, which we all need to be evaluating, which is, all these moves that you've made, are you better off than you were if you just had kept Geno Smith? And I don't think that it's a one or the other, but I think Robert was in a similar place of, I think a lot of the things he was thinking about would also involve Geno Smith. But Robert had, a little bit more of a sunny take, I would say, on some of this. And I'll play for you what Robert was saying.
Place to land. The DK thing, this is exactly what I had envisioned for the most part when I was talking about them trading DK.
By the way, on this show in December is when he started talking about that.
This is somewhat contingent on what happens with a guy like Tevin Jenkins, who is literally in their building today, taking a physical and talking to them about a contract. Let's say, hypothetically, they do sign Tevin Jenkins. What will have happened if he signed something like the Mekhi Becton contract, or a slight uptick on the Mekhi Becton contract, which is $10 million a year? What you have effectively done there is you will have traded DK Metcalf and his $30 million salary for a second-round pick, and you will have used that $30 million to sign Tevin Jenkins, Cooper Kupp, and Marquez Valdes-Scantling, plus a second-round pick. When I was envisioning them trading DK Metcalf, this is exactly what I had in mind. It was using all of that stuff to get 3 players and a pick, and not DK Metcalf. So that part of it, I fully support, because it's kind of what I wanted them to do from the beginning. I kind of imagined Geno would be the quarterback on the other end of this, and I felt a little bit better about him tying all that together. I still think that the gap between Geno and Darnold, when you consider the age, is maybe not quite as big as some of us are making it out to be.
So you hear from Robert, who talked on this show back in December about, from a roster building perspective, he really questioned whether DK Metcalf and as an extension here was the better move, or whether it made more sense to trade DK Metcalf, get some draft capital, and invest that cap space into other parts of the roster. That's exactly what they did. And so Robert's kind of like, yeah. I think the other thing that's interesting about what Robert was saying is, remember, Robert is a Bears fan. And I've talked to Robert about Tevin Jenkins before. The fact that he is talking about Tevin Jenkins of like, hey, if they make that move, it would make sense, I think is somewhat encouraging, because honestly, Brock Hewitt even said it on Brock and Salk, I think yesterday, talking about Tevin Jenkins. He checked in with his Bears folks. Same things that I'm hearing, which are like, really good player when he's on the field. And there are some questions about how much he loves the game. And like, is he going to play through? Is he going to play through these kind of more minor injuries? Or is he just going to kind of be there to collect a paycheck and do things, when he feels like doing it? That has me pretty concerned, to be honest. Like, it is a young, impressionable offense in general, and especially the offensive line room. I don't know that I want maybe what will become their highest paid player right now to be a guy that has that reputation. Hopefully, if they sign him, the Seahawks will have heard what they need and seen what they need to be convinced that that's not going to be a problem. But I am a little bit encouraged that Robert, who knows about those, I think those issues, talks about the Seahawks making that Tevin Jenkins move. And if you just isolate to DK Metcalf and you talk about DK Metcalf versus a second round pick plus Marquez Valdez-Scantling plus Cooper Kupp plus Tevin Jenkins, that starts to make sense. That's literally like about the same price. I think Tevin Jenkins is going to be maybe less than the Mekhi Becton contract, but we'll see. I don't know. So if you look at it from that regard, I'm not convinced the Seahawks are better right now after that move. But I fully, you'll have to see the second round pick to kind of see it all come together. But I fully believe that is a logical bet for the team to make. And I don't think that's actually even a complete picture, because Cooper Kupp may not be here for very long. And the DK Metcalf extension, which goes for another 4 years past this year, you're talking about cap space in each of those years as well. Marquez Valdez-Scantling may only be here for a year. You don't know. So this is also about flexibility into where you spend that cap in future years. And so all this is kind of, it's going to take a little time to settle, but it's a question about whether they are better right now. So I'm going to rewind on these guys and get a little bit more. And one of the things I wanted to play from day one, I could have played a bunch of stuff, but this is Robert on the day it happened with Sam Darnold, and really pretty fresh off the Geno trade. And this is like Derek Klassen had, I'm not going to play this part because you guys should check out the pod and listen to their stuff. But Derek Klassen had just gone on a rant about like, you were a playoff team. You were right there. And he believes very clearly that they made a couple of moves that this could be a 11-12 win team and that they could have won the division. And that now, after these moves, he doesn't think they have a chance to win the division. This is what Robert said in response to that.
I'm not out on what the best version of this can look like. I think that there is at least a chance that we see something close to Minnesota Sam Darnold. That again, he is changed player, seems extreme, but again, we're closer to what we saw last year than what we had seen previously. I'm open to that idea. And again, I'm open to looking at the price tags and thinking Sam for $8 million cheaper plus the pick is better for me than Geno. I think in the best case scenario, this hits and they're still a really good team. I just don't feel nearly as comfortable with it because I'd seen Geno do it for multiple years in shitty circumstances. And I know the receiving talent was good. We need to stop doing this where, oh, look at the receivers on the depth chart. This is a good situation. That it's just not true. It wasn't true in Chicago last year. It wasn't true in Houston last year. And it wasn't true in Seattle for the last 2 years. Pass protection and how easy the scheme makes it on quarterbacks are more important when we're judging a quarterback's performance than what their receiving talent looks like. And I think we need to come to terms with that. And I think that's the right way to think about this. And with that in mind, I just think that I have more evidence over a multi-year span that Geno Smith is a quality quarterback than I do with Sam Darnold, while again, also being open to the idea that even if it feels a little bit more fragile, there is still a path to this working the way that they envision it.
I thought that was great. That was great from Robert. And man, he's so good. He's really, really, really good at what he does. So smart, so informed from all sorts of different angles. I think he's the best out there. So one of the things that he said that I just found myself nodding, giving a very hard nod to, was enough with people saying that good quarterback situations are about the receiving talent. Like, enough. That's certainly an aspect of how you judge the supporting cast for a quarterback. But the most important things are not that. They are, what is the scheme? How friendly is it to quarterbacks? Does it give them easy answers? Does it give them options? Does it give them open receivers? Like, that's number one. And number two is probably offensive line play. And not just in terms of pass protection, but whether or not you can have an effective run game. If you have those things, if you have a decent run game, if you have decent line play, and you have a good scheme and a good play caller, I will take that 99 times out of 100 versus, T. Higgins and Jamar Chase and a bad offensive line. Like, I will. I will. And that's an experiment that's going to be like going on right now. And actually, they talk about the T. Higgins and Jamar Chase deal and what's going on in Cincinnati, and Derek has some good thoughts on that. And that was a high-powered offense last year. Now, I think their offensive line was a little bit better than the Seahawks, but still, and they have a good play caller. So it's not just A or B, but I guess I'm saying I would not start with your receivers if you're trying to build a quarterback-friendly system. So I think what you're hearing from both Derek and Robert would have been a lot more comfortable with this if Geno Smith. I mean, basically, both of them are saying if Geno Smith was a quarterback, they'd be 100% behind what the Seahawks did, because both of them were very supportive of the Geno trade. The DK trade, not the Geno trade. But the Geno trade is what's really thrown them, and I think Derek's a little frustrated about it. And that's going to be the thing, because the reality is I think Geno Smith is going to have maybe his best season down there with the Raiders, playing inside, playing with Pete, feeling again like he's got something to prove, playing with Brock Bowers. I think that I think he's gonna have maybe his best year, and if Sam Darnold doesn't, there'll be a lot of questions there. And I'm not sure that you can judge this move that John Schneider and the team has made based off of this season, because it wasn't just about this season. It's about the next 3 seasons at least. And it's also going to be based off of who they draft and assuming that one of those players that they draft is a quarterback. So a lot left to be written there. But it wasn't just those guys. It wasn't just those guys talking about what's going on here. Let's listen to Rich Eisen.
Stand back. Cooper Kupp just wanted to go home again.
Let's listen to Rich Eisen. So Rich Eisen on his Rich Eisen show was talking about this move, and he went on and on about like it's an interesting bet. And what he ends up with, talking to one of his, people in studio who's a Patriots fan, is like, would you have wanted to have the Patriots trade for DK Metcalf, pay him that much money, and give up a second round pick? And here is what that conversation sounded like.
But even with DK going to Pittsburgh and not having somebody to throw to it, you, sir, as a New England Patriot fan with more money to spend on anybody you want, you even thought that was too rich.
Too much.
You don't want to start building a roster with a $30 million
I don't.
wide receiver.
Mm-mm.
So Seattle made that move.
And giving up the draft pick to get him? No.
I kind of think it's a smart bet that they're now amassing the draft choices for Geno and DK. And you are, I guess technically handing the Rams a compensatory pick next year, but that's not the stuff you think about. You're thinking about, let's get the guy in. Let's start building our roster this way. Let's get going. And you're also playing off the fact that he wants to beat the old team. He knows the division. He knows the area. Kid's coming home. Great story. I like it.
I like it too. And I
It's
think
all said and done.
in Seattle, you're probably looking at, hey, look, the Rams are probably the best team in this division, but the team that has run this division for a while is down. They're taking some they're taking some punches. And I don't know if they're going to be there. Yeah, Arizona's up and coming, but I like our situation a little bit better. They think they can get back in the playoffs.
Catch the rich.
So yeah, Rich generally was you could see him, if you watch or listen to that episode, you could see him just trying to absorb these moves, and he couldn't quite get to one way or another, but generally he was like, I think it makes sense. Get younger at quarterback, get a little bit older but cheaper at receiver, get cheaper in both regards, and get 2 high picks, 2 day 2 picks, and build around your existing core. And plus, he loves the Cooper Kupp story, as you could hear him talking about. So I think he gets it, but you could hear him kind of contemplating like whether this makes sense. And I think the other part that was interesting to me there is thinking about what this means for DK Metcalf and that deal. What you're hearing pretty much like across the board was support of that. Now, the most obvious move and what the Seahawks wanted to do was to keep DK Metcalf, but he may have saved them from themselves. Almost everybody believes that trade was the right move for the Seahawks to make. And I've seen a lot of criticism for the Steelers making that move. This next clip that I wanted to play for you guys, I got a couple more here, comes from Albert Breer and Connor Orr. And this is on the MMQB, the Sports Illustrated podcast. And you're going to hear Connor Orr here at the beginning ask who's the winner in free agency. And then you're going to hear Albert answer.
Give me a winner of free agency.
Yeah, so I'll say the Seahawks.
I agree.
Maybe it's where they are in the country, so far separate from all the rest of us. But I think they've done a really nice job drafting and developing the last couple of years, and I think that's really helped the transition from Pete Carroll to Mike McDonald. And you look at the young base of players, and it's guys like Devin Witherspoon and Jackson Smith and Jigba and Kenneth Walker and Charles Cross, and there's like a lot of good young players there. Reek Woolen. And they're sort of spread throughout the roster. And if you look at it near them and you say, we're not going to re-sign DK Metcalf, and we may not be and we're $10 million apart in our negotiation with Geno, well, then is it a bad result to come out of that with Sam Darnold, a 2nd round pick and a 3rd round pick?
No.
So now they've got 5 picks in the top 100. They got 7 years younger and ostensibly cheaper at quarterback as well. And they've got this young core that can kind of grow up. They've got their offensive coordinator now, and Clint Kubiak, who I think will last there. Unless they win too big, I guess, right? But
That's Albert Breer talking about his reaction and kind of his reasoning why he named the Seahawks a winner in free agency. It's interesting. Like Minnesota to me seems like the obvious choice as a winner in free agency, perhaps because they did so many things that I think Seahawks fans would have liked Seattle to do. They invested very heavily in the trenches on both sides of the ball. I think the question with the Vikings is they might do all of those things, and if JJ McCarthy's not the guy, they might be not as good of a team this year. They might take a step back. They won 14 games last year. They might not win 10 if JJ McCarthy's not the guy. So I like generally what they did there, but it's going to be really interesting. I think Minnesota is kind of inextricably linked to Seattle with Sam Darnold coming here, with them paying Will Fries without getting a physical when the Seahawks were not willing to do that. Now Garrett Bradbury, their center, is being released because they signed Ryan Kelly. The Seahawks are kind of linked to Bradbury maybe coming here. There's a lot of things that make those two teams kind of an interesting pairing to watch through the next season. That wasn't just it from Albert Breer. He went on to talk about how valuable it's going to be potentially to have these picks in this particular draft. And here is Albert talking about that.
And this is a draft again, like where you don't want to be in the top 10, but if you've got picks from like 25 to 75, 25 to 100, then you could really, walk away with a bunch of starters. And I think that's where the Seahawks are right now,
Totally.
So I really like what they've done to kind of get younger and double down on their young core here. And again, like the big if is, can they get enough out of Sam Darnold? Because Geno was a really good player for them the last year. Can they get enough out of Sam Darnold to at least tread water at quarterback? And
yeah, I mean, every time I have question or concern about the moves that the Seahawks have made, and there are times I kind of like just don't know how it's going to go with Sam Darnold here. 100% believe he was the best alternative to Geno Smith, but I don't know how it's going to go. I'm not assuming he's going to be anywhere near the player he was last year. Geno Smith, frankly, was not able to reproduce what he produced his first season as a starter in Seattle. But then I look at those draft picks and I look at 5 picks in the top 92, and I think so much rides on what happens on day 1 and day 2 of this draft. So much for this franchise rides on that. And if they're able to hit even 3+ starters out of the 5 picks, if they're able to get 6 picks and like at 3 or 4, it's just a massive change. I mean, you look at the 2022 draft for the Seahawks, where they added Charles Cross and Abe Lucas and Kenneth Walker and Boye Mafe, and Reek Woolen, if I didn't say that already, and Kobe Bryant. I mean, there's a lot of talent in one draft. You look at the Devin Witherspoon and JSN draft, and then you add Derek Hall and Zach Charbonnet to a lesser degree. There have been like pretty big infusions in those moments, and so if the Seahawks can add, and ideally 1 or 2 of those hits, like those really big additions, are offensive linemen, Seahawks could be cooking. And if one of them that they add is a quarterback, and that looks like somebody that could eventually be your starter, then this really looks very, very, very different than it does right now. So I think it already right now might work out. I think it's like, I would say less than a 50-50 bet that the Seahawks will be better than they were last year from an offense standpoint, from a player standpoint. I think the offense has a chance to be, I'd say the offense has more than a 50% chance to be better. because of Clint Kubiak, because of the commitment to the run game, because of the coaching staff, because the offensive line in terms of the tackles. Abe Lucas, I posted a video yesterday of him that he posted on his Instagram driving 550 pounds on the sled. Like, him for a full season healthy, Charles Cross is a major difference maker than the Mike Jarrell, George Fant injured, Stone Forsythe rotating door that they had for the most of last year. And I think that the interior line, all those guys have a chance to take a step forward. So I think there's reasons why the offense could be better, but as far as the personnel and the top end ceiling, I don't know. But then you add in the draft, really, really, really could turbocharge things. So the next one I wanted to play, last one I wanted to play, is actually Greg Rosenthal and Daniel Jeremiah. And there's a couple things here that I think got my attention, and I'm going to play these for you here. The first is Daniel Jeremiah talking about all these moves that the Seahawks have made.
Couple moves that make sense to me. I thought Cooper Kupp made a lot of sense for them to give them just a reliable, dependable pass catcher, always going to be where he's supposed to be, going to catch everything. I thought he could complement, you can move him around a little bit. With him and JSN, you've got two really smart, heady players. So that one makes sense there. Garrett Bradbury reuniting with Sam Darnold. I know Bradbury struggles a little bit with power, but in the run game, he's really good, can get up and climb to second level, cut guys off, all that stuff. So just having the relationship there with Sam, I thought that one would make some sense. But, the interior of the offensive line is, that would be my greatest concern right now. And that's not just going to be solved with a move like that. They're going to have to draft, and they're going to have to hit. And I think some part of what we saw with the DeMarcus Lawrence thing is not just to help the defense. Again, Greg, I think it all marries together with the draft, and they're thinking, man, there's going to be a run on these defensive linemen in the first round. There's a ton of them. And so they can sit out they don't want to be on the middle to tail end of the D lineman run when they might be able to get near the top of the interior offensive line run with where they're picking. So that made some sense to me.
An interesting point there. And again, I'm going to react to Daniel Jeremiah's latest mock draft, which I have not looked at yet. And I'm not going to read chat because I don't want anyone giving it away. I'll do that in just a second. And I'm also going to react to Mel Kiper's latest mock draft. But what he's saying there is the DeMarcus Lawrence signing for him makes sense on some regard because he believes that the defensive line players may actually get tapped out. At least there's going to be a run on them in the first round. And that could, similar to last year where quarterbacks pushed down Byron Murphy, that the run on defensive linemen in this year's draft could push down an offensive lineman that is an interior offensive lineman. And, he's a big fan, you're going to hear in a second, of a specific player, and I wouldn't be surprised if that's who he's picked in his mock for them. But I want you to listen to Greg Rosenthal. Greg's a little bit more skeptical and been a little snarky about some of these moves, but listen to what he says here about these moves.
Another case where I think they're betting on John Schneider, right or wrong, and he's done a great job there overall over the years. They're really trusting him, his vision at quarterback, developing some of his players, and he's working in concert with Mike McDonald. But he's got the juice in that building, kind of like DJ's got the juice on this show. Let's take a quick break. Ultimately,
Hold on, real quick before you get to the break. Real quick. This team's 28th in the league in rushing yards. Seattle, their backs are so much better than that. That tells you again. They've got to get offensive line. Gray Zabel, go get him. Just go do it in the first round.
So DJ telling you where he wants the Seahawks to go. But, Greg Rosenthal bringing up the point about that they're betting on John Schneider. And it will forever be a tale of many sides with, who's going to ultimately be able to hold the pen that writes the history book of how this came to be. Will be fascinating because you could absolutely tell the story that John Schneider and the Seahawks wanted Geno Smith and DK Metcalf back, that was what they wanted. They were very clear on that, and that can be true, but that there was also a price that they were willing to do that at, and that price was not what Geno Smith and DK Metcalf were willing to do that for. And so you could make the case that, well, if they really wanted them back, they could have paid to keep them. And so how much did they really want them back? I think is kind of the question. My sense is they really did want them back. But in any event, you hear Greg Rosenthal and almost everybody else is going to be like, the Seahawks made these moves. Even Derek Klassen, when he was talking about this, was like, I just believed that if you're close enough, you should keep competing and go for it. You shouldn't be trading a guy like Geno Smith. They didn't want to. Like, the implication is that they intentionally did this. I think that you could spin this to say, well, they weren't willing to spend the money, so they did intentionally do this. But, Geno's camp didn't come back with a counteroffer. Like, it goes back and forth. And so people are going to be grabbing the quill to write this story. And the truth of the matter is, the Seahawks, this was not plan A. And so I think talking about it as the Seahawks and John Schneider making these moves is a little bit misleading, and maybe a lot misleading. I think that they might have done some things that led up to this point where they got themselves into the situation, but their plan going into free agency, there's no way John Schneider would have put Mike McDonald in a situation where he was out in public in all the places that he was saying that Geno Smith is going to be their quarterback. I don't know why this is even a conversation. I'm confused. We can win a Super Bowl with Geno Smith and then trade him. Like that was John Schneider's plan all along. No, that was not his plan. And Brady Henderson reported again on Bump and Stacy yesterday that they offered at least $40 million in the first year of the deal, and that it was comparable to the Matthew Stafford contract that Stafford just re-signed with the Rams, and that there was no counter. Anyway, Brady's coming out with a big story. We'll see. Brady's always got some great insights on what's going on there. We'll hear more about that from him. But all of this analysis seems based on this notion that the Seahawks intentionally, John Schneider intentionally made these moves. Like that was their plan from the beginning, and it's just not the case. All right, so that is it on the whispers that we are hearing around the league. Let's check out Super Chats real quick, and then we'll get into draft stuff. So Super Chats, Bryce Coots is giving away 20 Hawk Blogger memberships. Awesome. And I saw Bryce join the Discord channel yesterday, which was awesome as well. Good to have him over there. Felipe Imanishi, I think I got that right, has become a member. Well, welcome, Felipe. And hopefully maybe that's a club level membership so you get access to the Discord channel. There are instructions for how to get in there if you're on YouTube or Patreon in their respective places. I put a post in the community tab on the YouTube channel, on this channel, that has the instructions. So let's go ahead and get to it with reacting to the latest mock drafts. I've been looking forward to doing this, and it's been very hard for me to wait to do this. So I'm going to do Daniel Jeremiah's first, and then we'll react to Mel Kiper Jr.'s next. Here we go on Daniel Jeremiah's mock, and okay, good. Let me share this up here so we can look at this together. You can see what I see. And like I said, I have not looked at this yet, so I don't know what I'm about to see. And this was just published this morning. Increasingly, the prediction around is that Cam Ward's going to be the number 1 overall pick, whether that's the Tennessee Titans that make that pick or whether they trade it to somebody else, Cam Ward seems pretty clearly to be the number 1 overall pick. That pushes down a guy like Abdul Carter going to the Browns here, and then Shedeur Sanders going 3. So Shedeur Sanders has kind of been all over the place in terms of people at the combine. The scuttlebutt was he might slide, maybe even out of the first round, but into the 20s was a conversation for a lot of folks. He's got him going number 3 to the New York Giants. And if I'm Shedeur Sanders, the only way that I'm really not throwing at the combine is if I've got some assurances that I'm not falling out of the top 10. Maybe the Giants have already made that clear. And you can absolutely see the storylines of Deion Sanders' kid going and playing quarterback in New York City. Would not shock me. And for the Giants right now, they have a quarterback opening, and if you're Joe Shane, the GM, a rookie quarterback pick number 3 overall maybe gets you another year or 2 to see if your rest of your plan can come together. But makes sense. That pushes Travis Hunter all the way down to 4, which is interesting. I mean, might be the most talented player in the draft. Patriots, who bungled away thanks to Joe Milton, the number 1 overall pick, could end up with the best player if this is the case. Worth noting on the Joe Milton front, I know my Joe Milton fans along with me, that the rumor is that the Patriots are looking for a 3rd-round pick, which is what I thought they would ask for Joe Milton. I don't think the Seahawks are going to do that. I'm not sure anybody's going to do that, but that's not surprising that that's what they're looking for. So Jalen Walker, the edge, goes to the Jaguars. Ashton Jeanty to the Raiders. Could absolutely see that happening. I think it feels rich, even for Pete Carroll, to spend the 6th overall pick on a running back. I think it would make more sense for them to go offensive line. We'll see. Armand Membu going 7th overall. I think the dream's pretty much dead there for Seattle, but it was fun while it lasted. When we started doing these mock drafts, Armand Membu was in like the 2nd round, like the late 2nd round. And when I started looking into him more, I was like, what? Like, this guy's really good. Why is he so far down? And I was like, Ariante Ursary was above him in all these mocks. And I'm like, Ursary's not nearly as good as Armand Membu. What's going on? So that is all sorted itself out. And Armand Membu has climbed up the draft board. I'm almost positive he'll be a top 10 pick. Mason Graham to the Panthers. That's a great get for them at that level. Mason Graham kind of fallen down the board. And then you've got Jahad Campbell, who's a very hot riser right now in a lot of people's lists, going to the Saints, number 9. I don't see an inside backer going top 10. I don't see it. I'm not saying he's not one of the 10 best players. I'm just not sure I see inside backer, even though he can rush the passer. I'm just not sure I see it. Will Campbell to the Bears. I mean, that would be an ideal thing for the Bears, for Will Campbell to fall to them. I think that's certainly possible. He's got Jahdae Barron going to the 49ers. That's an interesting pick. If I'm a 49ers fan, I hate that pick. Not because Barron's a bad player, but because the needs there are so clearly on the trenches. You've got to go defensive line or offensive line. And yes, they lost Charvarius Ward. I just don't think this is the right pick. But I would be thrilled if they made it, because I want their trenches to get more and more weakened. I can't see it. 49ers, you look at their top picks when they've had kind of top half of the first round picks under, with Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch, it's almost all been defensive linemen. So I would guess it's going to be defensive linemen, but maybe if one of the offensive linemen slipped to them that they like, they go that direction. Matthew Golden, also been a very heavy, hot riser, the wide receiver goes to the Cowboys at 12. Malachi Starks goes at 13, the safety to the Dolphins. Tyler Warren to the Colts seems like this thing that everybody's picking, that he's not going to fall past the Colts. I do wonder, Warren's the kind of guy that I just wonder if he's going to fall a little farther than people think, and if the Seahawks might have a choice to make there. 15th goes the Falcons get Will Johnson, the cornerback. 16, Mr. Jeremiah has Gray Zabel now going 16th overall. That is fascinating to see. Says there will be quite a few teams targeting Zabel in this area of the draft. He's had a great process from his final college season to the Reese's Senior Bowl to the NFL Scouting Combine. So, wow, if Gray Zabel ends up top half of the first round, that is a meteoric rise. I mean, there are people that had a 4th round grade on him before the Senior Bowl. Like, that would be huge. And I mean, it's interesting. Dan Jeremiah knows what he's doing, and I'm not going to say no. Okay, we're almost to the Seahawks. 17th pick is Mike Green, the edge rusher, goes to the Bengals. That could make some sense there. And then we go to 18, and he has the Seahawks picking Colston Loveland, the tight end from Mike McDonald's University of Michigan Wolverines. He says the Seahawks might have bigger needs, but the value is just too great to pass up. Too great to pass up Loveland at number 18. The former Michigan tight end joins Jackson Smith and Jigba, Cooper Kupp to give Sam Darnold an intriguing group of pass catchers. Now, I have generally been completely dismissing the possibility of Colston Loveland going to the Seahawks because he's really a receiver. Like he plays his position is tight end, but he's essentially a receiver. He's split out. He is not a blocker. And Clint Kubiak's been really clear that blocking is an important part of the position for tight end. So it just feels like a really odd fit. But Griff Sturgeon, see Mike's spin move on Twitter, made a valid point. I found a tweet yesterday that I shared out that Juwan Johnson, the tight end for the Saints, did mention that the Seahawks pursued him, but he ended up picking a different landing spot. That's news. And the fact that the Seahawks pursued Juwan Johnson, who played for the Saints last year, who played for Clint Kubiak and had some success, obviously, tells a different story because Juwan Johnson is not a good blocker. And Griff compared the closest comp to Juwan Johnson in the draft would be Colston Loveland. So I think you've got to consider this now as a real possibility. There's nobody I've seen or heard doubt that Colston Loveland is a really talented prospect. The question has been whether he's a fit for what the Seahawks will want to do. Tyler Warren is a great blocker. He's also a guy that can be a wildcat quarterback, a short yardage weapon. He's a run after the catch tackle breaker. He's all sorts of things. He, to me, would be an ideal fit. And I think some people have compared, weekly. I'm not sure it's a perfect comparison. Like Tyler Warren is like George Kittle. Colston Loveland is like Travis Kelce. And I think that sells Travis Kelce a little bit short. I think Travis Kelce can do some blocking, but it's at least directionally helpful to think about it that way. I don't love this pick. The same reason I don't like drafting a receiver at this pick. And by the way, we have not seen the name Tet McMillan come off the board yet. So if you're a receiver guy, Tet McMillan would be sitting here and they wouldn't pick that either. I struggle with this move because this means you are waiting until the 50th overall pick, unless you trade up, which I also don't love because you're going to give up some of that day 2 draft capital that you just acquired. Unless you trade up, you're missing it. You're definitely missing out on Donovan Jackson. You're missing out. You've already missed out on Gray Zabel. He went ahead of you. You're missing out on Kelvin Banks. I think you might be missing out on Tate Ratledge at 50. I think all those things are possible. You're going to miss out on your best bets at interior offensive line. And I don't love it. And we just heard from Mr. Jeremiah that there's going to be this run on defensive linemen and they have a chance to get some of the best interior offensive linemen, and he's got them going a different direction. So I don't love it. It is interesting to see, worth, that conversation we're just having about it. We're going to look at Mel Kiper's draft in just a second, but let's look. He's got Donovan Ezeraku, the edge rusher, going after Marion Hampton, the running back. Jackson Dart, 21st overall to the Steelers. A lot of people are starting to mock this because, and I don't mean they're putting it in their mock drafts. Let me get more clear. The Steelers have been looking for their young quarterback to develop. A lot of people are starting to associate Jackson Dart with him, with that team. And this could be it could be that if the Seahawks really value Dart and think that's their guy, they might have to take him at 18. I wouldn't love that, to be very honest. I just would not love that. I don't think Jackson Dart is a sure enough bet that you should be spending your first round pick on him if you're the Seahawks. Then he's got Tet McMillan, the receiver, going to the Chargers at 22. Max Hairston, the cornerback, going to the Packers at 23. Nick Emenwari, our favorite safety prospect, going to the Vikings. My God. If the Vikings added Nick Emenwari to that crew, I mean, they would just be adding all the guys that I want if they did that. He's got Kelvin Banks going 25 to the Texans, the tackle, potentially the guard. He's got Trey Amos, the cornerback, going to the Rams at 26. Derek Harmon, the defensive tackle, who I think is going to be a guy that people are going to be like, why did he go later? I think he's going to be one of the most productive defensive linemen in this class for sure. Going to the Ravens, that would be a total Ravens pick. Makes a lot of sense. He's got Michael Williams, who has just fallen down like a brick. He was a top 10 pick in almost all these. Before the season, he was a number 1 overall pick candidate. He's got him going 28th to the Lions. You've got the Commanders drafting lanky cornerback Azariah Thomas 29th. Azariah Thomas seems like a cool guy, interesting body type. Was not super impressed with his movement skills at the combine. I'm not even sure I'd want him at 50, let alone 29. He's got Kenneth Grant, has fallen down his board a little bit, goes to the Bills. He had Kenneth Grant going to the Seahawks at 18, I think in his first mock draft. Maybe even in his second. I can't remember. No, I had Gray Zabel going to the Seahawks in his second. Bills getting Kenneth Grant at 30 makes sense. And then you've got the Chiefs drafting Josh Simmons. That would be a great get and a great fit. Tackle, young guy, talented player, be a great fit for the Chiefs. And then he's got Shamar Stewart all the way at the end of the first round, going 32nd to the Eagles. No way. You do not get to draft Shamar Stewart at the end of the first round. You don't get to do that. I will not allow it. I will find some way to stop that from happening. The Eagles do not get, Howie Roseman does not get to sit at the end of the first round and draft maybe the most talented edge rusher in this class from a athletic profile standpoint. Not in terms of production, but athletic profile. Like, no way. You don't get to do that. They can't keep having these guys fall to them. But I don't know. Like, I have a lot of respect for Daniel Jeremiah and what he does in these. I did not love the Colston Loveland fit. So let's now take a look at what's going on with Mel Kiper. And in order for that to happen, I've got to log in. And here we go. I will share this with you guys. So let's take a look at Mel Kiper's mock draft, okay? This is number 1 overall, Cam Ward. Number 2, Abdul Carter. Same as Daniel Jeremiah. Number 3, Shedeur Sanders. So we've got some alignment happening on the top 4 picks. Travis Hunter there. Mason Graham going to the Jags. That's a little bit different than what Jeremiah had. He had the Jags going with Jalen Walker. Personally, I think Mason Graham makes more sense. I think he's a really high impact interior line defensive tackle. So he's also got Ashton Jeanty going to the Raiders. So we'll see what happens there. He's got Tyler Warren going to the Jets, so he's got him going higher. Jalen Walker, he's got going to the Panthers. Jackson Dart, number 9 overall. What? He has got 3 quarterbacks in the top 10. Okay, he says, okay, here's the surprise pick, and I know the Saints just restructured Derek Carr's contract to tie him to the team for at least one more season, but what happens after that season? New coach Kellen Moore might want a young quarterback to work with and develop over the course of 2025 before turning the offense over to him in 2026. I'm hearing more and more first-round buzz on Dart, and New Orleans seems like a good fit. He wouldn't be forced to play right away and could learn behind Carr. This team still has a lot of roster-building decisions to make, but getting the QB of the future now does make some sense. Dart at 9 would be wild. Wild. I don't know about that. And this is the benefit of me doing these live reactions. You guys get I haven't seen these before. I'm seeing them the first time. So you guys have probably already seen all this stuff. Michael Williams, he's got him still higher, 10th overall. Dan Jeremiah had him well down the board. I would be thrilled if the Bears went defensive line instead of offensive line. I think they're going to try to complete their offensive line. 49ers getting Armand Membu. Screw you. No way. Do not allow this to happen. They do not get to get either Armand Membu or Will Campbell. Please do not let this happen. Of course, if this is possible, then that's 49ers having access to either of those guys is the only way the Seahawks would have potential to get one of those guys. But don't do it, man. This would stink. He's too good. He's too good to end up down there. And I just, if the Seahawks can't have him, the 49ers certainly cannot have him. Amarian Hampton to the Cowboys, the running back. He's got Will Campbell slipping all the way to 13 to the Dolphins. We'll see. I don't think it's crazy that Will Campbell could slide. It's probably unrealistic that he's going to get all the way to 18. Probably. I mean, his arm length is a legitimate question mark. It is a legitimate question mark. He's a very good player, but it's a legitimate question mark, especially if teams really see him as a guard. How high will they take him? Now he's got Colston Loveland going to the Colts. This is due to Tyler Warren, I'm guessing, already being gone. By the way, I'm going to have a fun guest on Thursday. Let me get that pulled open here real quick and I'll tell you who. But I've been wanting to talk James Boyd. James Boyd of The Athletic, I'll be having on Thursday morning. Because I just have this question. I want to know from a person who's covered the Colts closely. Everyone's lauding the Vikings for getting Ryan Kelly and Will Fries. Colts have a very young quarterback, and they just let both those guys go. I want to know more about that. So we're going to talk to someone on the Colts side of this on Thursday, James Boyd, who's awesome for The Athletic. Looking forward to that conversation. All right. Mike Green to the Falcons, the edge rusher at 15. That would make a ton of sense. I actually think that's a perfect fit. No notes on that. Mike Green belongs in Atlanta as an edge rusher. He's got Will Johnson sliding down the cornerback to the Cardinals. That also makes a lot of sense. I think the cornerback room is really, if you saw my comparison of the NFC West rosters a couple days ago, cornerback room for the Cardinals is needing some attention for sure. Now he's got Shamar Stewart going one pick ahead of the Seahawks at 17 to the Bengals. That makes a ton of sense to me. So he says he's one of his LTP guys, which means he looks the part. Okay, Mel. And I believe it. I still think Shamar Stewart is going to be top half of the first round, but we'll see. He's a guy that could fall. All right, so let's see who he's got going to the Seahawks. He's got Nick Emenwari, the safety, going to the Seahawks at 18. He says, Texas offensive tackle Kelvin Banks Jr. was an option here. Somewhere Nathan Ernst is screaming into the void because Nathan is like, you cannot pass on Kelvin Banks. And he's saying he could kick inside to guard for Seattle. I also wouldn't discount the Seahawks finding a DK Metcalf replacement at wideout. but Emanwari reminds me of Kyle Hamilton, whom Seattle head coach Mike McDonald worked with previously as the Ravens defensive coordinator in 2022 and 2023. We witnessed Emanwari's speed, 4.38 in the 40, and explosiveness, 43-inch vert. By the way, number one overall at safety for Raz since 1987. Like, he has a 10.0 100th percentile Raz score as a safety. We also saw his ball hawking traits, 4 picks last season. Emanwari would help bolster an already strong secondary in Seattle. Well, you saw my reaction. I am never going to be upset if the Seahawks get Nick Emanwari on this team. I would love. He is a dog. He is a brute. He is smart. He is like blue chip athleticism. He can also play on offense a little bit, by the way. I would love it. Is it the smartest thing? Is it the best thing? I don't know. I'm not sure I can. I've had a hard time with my mock drafts when I go Nick Emanwari first. Same situation that I talked about with Jeremiah. You're waiting until 50 to take an offensive lineman. You're pushing down your quarterback need as well, your wide receiver need, your tight end need. It's tough. It is tough. Like, I get picking best player available, but you've created some needs on your roster now. And by not getting Will Fry, if you got Will Fries, 10 out of 10. I'm all for it. If you got a Drew Dahlman, 10 out of 10. Like, I could totally handle that. But the fact that they've struck out, maybe they'll get Tevin Jenkins. I'm telling you, that doesn't change the calculus that much for me. I'm not going to count on that guy, given his history, until, honestly, we get through a season with him. So I'm certainly not going to count on him. If they sign him before the draft, I'm going to treat it like they didn't sign him. That's honestly how I will look at that situation. They need to have multiple options at the guard spot. So I love the player. I would be excited. I'm not sure it's the best move for the Seahawks, given the way things have gone for them in free agency. Let's just see the rest of his first round. He's got Jahad Campbell going later, 19. He's got Ted McMillan going 20. Derek Harmon, 21 to the Steelers. I can absolutely see Harmon in Pittsburgh. He's got the Chargers taking receiver Matt Golden. The Packers taking wide receiver Emeka Egbuka, who, by the way, has also fallen down some boards. Vikings take Jahdae Barron, the cornerback. Would make some sense. They need corner help. Texans take Josh Simmons. That also makes perfect sense in Houston. That, my God, they've just destroyed their offensive line that already was not good. Got the Rams taking Azariah Thomas, the cornerback. Good. They can have him. Baltimore Ravens take Malachi Starks, the safety. That is if they get Starks, what an ideal fit. Really, really Ravensy pick right there. James Pierce Jr., the edge rusher for the Lions at 28. Max Hairston, the cornerback for the Commanders, 29. Kenneth Grant to the Bills at 30. That I could see that for sure. Bills are often spending their first round picks on interior defensive linemen. Kelvin Banks slides all the way to the Chiefs at 31. I don't think this is crazy. I honestly don't. I think the problem with Banks, if you watch his tape, is he's a little sloppy at tackle. I'm not sure that's where he can stick. I like him at guard, but his pass protection is not ideal. Where he looks elite, and I love watching him, is when he gets out on the move, on screens, on pulls. He is a guy that really destroys people in those situations, and I like that. But I think I wouldn't quite call him a tweener, but I think there's some question about exactly what he is and how you're going to deploy him. But he's certainly an interesting player. Eagles getting Walter Nolan at 32. I mean, that's the thing. The Eagles are going to be sitting there and they're going to get somebody good. They're in a really good spot. They don't really have many needs. They can really just take best player available. And in this draft, Walter Nolan sliding them absolutely could happen. Makes perfect sense. Shamar Stewart sliding to them, I could not abide that, but it's not out of the question. I think it's close to out of the question, but it's not out of the question. I think the Eagles are going to get another great pick there. So that was my live reaction to Daniel Jeremiah and Mel Kiper's new mock drafts. Let me just check to see. I've intentionally not been following any of the news to make sure I didn't see anyone tell me about those mock drafts. We got Brandon Graham of the Eagles is retiring. So he retires as a Super Bowl champ. Good for him. Cam Hayward on recruiting Aaron Rodgers says, quote, "I ain't doing that darkness retreat. I don't need any of that crap. Either you want to be a Steeler or you don't. It's simple. That's the pitch." Hard not to like Cam Hayward. There was actually, I recommend you listen to that whole Athletic Football Show podcast because, oh my God, listening to Robert Mays talk about Aaron Rodgers was chef's kiss. It was so good. He talked about him being an energy vampire and like, you don't let an energy vampire into your home if you're the Vikings. And I was thinking about the same thing relative to the Seahawks. It was really funny and it was well done. So it does not look like there is any new news. So let me check out Super Chat. I got one Super Chat here from Eric Tam. Says, Brian, I assume you'd move up one slot to draft Armand Membu if you fell to 17. Would you pay to move up to 16, 15? Seeing who you trade up to pick and the price you pay sounds like a fun show. Well, Eric, thank you for the Super Chat. I am pretty much team never trade up in this draft in the first round, especially for almost anybody. If Membu was there at 17, maybe, but only if like there was some other team that was going to trade into the spot and snipe him from you. I just think this team is not one player away. I really like Membu. I think he's going to be very good. That's not enough. Like right now, I would be much more comfortable if Membu falls to them, you take him. He's definitely in that category. He won't fall to them, by the way. I'm much more in the camp of, I think they really ideally find some trade back partners into the mid-20s, and if they can't get Gray Zabel, they get Donovan Jackson. Neither of these drafts that we just saw, these mock drafts, had Donovan Jackson going in the first round. I don't care. I would take Donovan Jackson. I think he is a much more projectable guard, even than I think he's comparable to Zabel in terms of how high his floor is. And I think maybe how high his ceiling is. I think Zabel has a little bit more flexibility and I think might fit the system a little bit better, but I'm pretty much down to those two guys. You notice Tyler Booker not in either of those mocks. And am I right? Let me make sure I'm not lying to you, because Daniel Jeremiah has had Tyler Booker at like 12 or 13 overall in his first two mocks. And yeah, he doesn't have him in the first round anymore. That's where I'm at on Tyler Booker. That's where I kind of always have been. There was a moment where I kind of was like, okay, he's a great leader. That's what this room needs. And then I saw his athletic scoring and I'm like, I'm out on the first round in Tyler Booker. I know I'm going far afield. I'll come back to it. So the quick answer to your question is no, I would not trade up. I could think about doing a show on it, but generally my shows are things I actually am interested in. Like I believe the Seahawks should explore or some insight. I don't think they should do this. So I don't know if I'll probably do a show. But maybe I'll bring someone on who believes that they should do it and they can try to convince me that they should do it. And we'll see how that goes. So that's an option, but I really appreciate the super chat from Eric. All right. So with that, we'll just remind folks, if you haven't already, make sure you go to patreon.com/hawkblogger, join there. It's a great time to join. get over to the Discord channel, or if you're a YouTube member, upgrade to be a club level YouTube member. It is easy to do, or a suite level. Suite level members get access to a special channel that only they will be in, along with other people from the Real Hawk Talk crew. So it's a great time to be a club level member. It's even better time to be a suite level member, as well as Ring of Honor members on Patreon get access to that channel. So absolutely would love to see more of you join and support the show. Let's see if we can get to 17,000 subscribers. We're at almost that right now. So click like, click subscribe, all that stuff. Would appreciate it. Eric's back with another super chat saying, he says, thanks for the great answer. You got it, Eric. Appreciate you, man. All right, I'm going to go do my workout. We'll see if there's any Seahawks news that comes out. As of now, there is a press conference today. So I will now have to figure out that. We will be talking to Cooper Kupp later today. So keep an eye out. Make sure you click that bell to get notified. I'll let you know more about it after that. Take care, everybody. I'll see you soon.